Judges chapter 7. Judges 7. This is the story of Gideon's 300. The title of this is God's Restriction for Gideon's Ground Force. He didn't just let him build his own army. Now, that man does it that way. Give me as many as I can take over, buddy. I'm going to show full strength. Well, of course, that's not the way God does it, because that's the way man does it. He's going to show that he's superior. Paul told Timothy once, he said, "Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ." So we're soldiers too. So when we read in here about Gideon and him putting together an army, or God putting together the army, we can learn something, because we are soldiers spiritually. And so we'll learn what restrictions God puts on this army, who qualifies, who doesn't, that type of thing. We'll go to Judges chapter 7. Judges 7, verse 3. He says, "Now therefore go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people about 22,000, and there remained 10,000. Whoa, he got him a big crowd of 32,000 and thought, hey, we've got something here. This is a good start. Now he's going up against two massive armies. They've joined forces. And he says, well, we got 32,000. Let's get them trained. You know, we can put 10 to flight and maybe we'll come out even. God says, nah, you got too many. Let's chop it down. The first thing I see here is God's first requirement is no coward. No cowards. He says, go ask the people, anybody in here a sissy? We got any scaredy cats? If you're afraid, take off for the house. We don't need you. Wow. And you would think, okay, well, that in and of itself is a challenge. Nobody, after saying that, nobody's going to hold their hand up and say, I'm the sissy. But look at it. More sissies left than were there. 22,000 take off. Wow. He's got 10,000 left. Cowards usually run in a pack. You find a pack of people, guess what? The majority of it is cowards. Bad news. Notice, it was the law of the Lord that sent the sissies running for the hills. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 8, Deuteronomy 20, verse 8, here Gideon is instructed to do the very thing the law had prescribed many years before. Deuteronomy 20, verse 8, "And the officer shall speak further unto the people, and shall say, What man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return unto his house, lest his brethren's heart faint as well as his heart." Okay? The courageous can't keep company with the cowards and keep their focus. Because somebody who's brave, trying to buck up the guy who's a scaredy cat, is not paying attention to the force that's coming against him. It's diverted his attention. Or sometimes, who was it? Patton said that cowardice is epidemic.
Yes.
Yeah. If you put a bunch of cowards in a group, it won't be long until the whole group is coward.
Times 5.
That's right. That's them. In Revelation 17, verse 14, we find this army the way it should be, the way God finally gets it right, fixes man up so he's the way he's intended to be, and does some warfare. Revelation 17:14 says, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful." Now, this army is not made up of just simple volunteers and come as you are, play like you want. No, it's a strict army, and it has restrictions. Okay, the first thing we saw is no coward. No coward. In Matthew, he says this, "But he that receiveth a seed in stony places, the same is he that heareth the word, and anon with joy receiveth it." Anon just means immediately. "Yet He hath no root in himself, but dureth for a while. And when tribulation or persecution ariseth, because of the word, by and by he is offended. Okay, that's the sissy who needs to run home. He got offended. Does the word of God offend you? Okay. You know what most people do? They get afraid of it and won't open it back up. They're scared. They run to their true home, the flesh, and they'll hide out there. The word was in this guy's heart. He received it. He said immediately, with joy. But it wasn't in there to stay, because when there was something uncomfortable, something scary showed up, persecution, he said, I'm done. I'm done. That's most Christians. Most of us have been there. If you're not there right now, good. Think back a little while and you'll find that you were there. You'll face it again. It's there in the Bible. Keep it open. Now, in Ezekiel, he says this. He has this little phrase that he says. People think of the Bible this way. They go to church. They have certain times when they want to look spiritual and sound spiritual. God has cut through that mess. Remember, we're not spiritual for man because man's not spiritual on his own. We're spiritual for God because God is the Spirit. Okay, here's what man does faking it. They think that spiritual things are lovely, like a lovely sound, as a pleasant voice, like one that plays well on an instrument. But they just say that with their ears and with their mouth and with their appearance. But God, who sees on the heart, sees the seed has not remained. Why? They're scared. They're scared. They're sissies. In Luke chapter 14, verse 27, he says this. Two things in this little passage that seem to be contradictory. Luke 14:27. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Impossible. If you won't pick up your cross and come after him, you cannot. It's impossible to be his disciple. So there's a cross that everybody has to bear. You've got to decide where yours is and go get it. Pick it up, tote it around. Now he said you're to bear that. That's something you carry. It's our responsibility. Now look at verse 33. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple. In one place he said, hold something. The next place he said, don't hold nothing. Forsake it all. All but your cross. Now that's a scary thing. It's a scary thing to think, I've got to carry around something that's going to kill me. A cross is not an emblem of a celebration. It's an emblem of death. We're to remember 24/7, this flesh has to be put to death. The desires of man have to be put under submission to God. Always. In Revelation 21, verse 8, he talks about the lake of fire. The very first thing on the list, he says, the fearful, the unbelieving, and then he goes through a long list, shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Now, by nature, we are fearful. We can't help it. An unsaved man is fearful regardless of how courageous a face he puts on it. By nature, they're fearful. We found that in Hebrews. In Hebrews 2:15, he says this, talking about the death of Jesus Christ, and delivered them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Man's in bondage in his natural state by the fear of death. He really is scared of death. That's why he tries to insulate himself with junk so he doesn't have to think about it. Because death says, I'm going to stand before somebody and give account. It's fearful. You need to get into him so you don't have that fear. Get in Jesus Christ. Let him be your counselor. He'll stand there and be your advocate with the Father. Okay, he said for this army, first thing, no cowards. All the fearful, go home. The next thing we see is in Judges 7, verse 4. No one conceited. Conceit doesn't fit in God's army. Now, God can be conceited because it's legitimate. There's no lie in it. Man starts getting conceited, there's a lie behind it. Judges 7, verse 4. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down into the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, this shall go with thee, the same shall go with thee. Of whomsoever I say unto thee, this shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. So he brought down the people unto the water. And the Lord said unto Gideon, every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. Likewise, every one that boweth down upon his knees to drink. Verse 6. And the number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, were 300 men. We've dropped from 10,000 to 300. The numbers are going the wrong direction. But all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. Here we are again, the majority doing the wrong thing. Now, they've been out doing exercises. You know, that's what military does. They drill until they just fall down, dead asleep. And then they get up way earlier than they wanted to and drill some more. Well, that's what Gideon's been doing. He's putting together an army, and he's trying to do it as fast as he can. He's working them as hard as he can. They've probably been on a march all day. He says, okay, y'all go get some water. Yeah, I'm going to see what they do. He says, the ones who just lay down like a dog, get on their knees, and just put their face in the water and suck it up, I don't need. They're not vigilant. They're conceited. They think, I'll be just fine. I don't have to worry about it. I've come so far. I know I've got my buddies back here backing me up. I've just done all these drills, buddy. I've mastered this thing. It's my turn to take a little R&R and get me some water. We don't get any R&R. Look at an interesting thing. You're in Judges 7. Look at verse 20. Verse 20. Here's the supplies Gideon has with this army. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers. Pitchers? What do you put in a pitcher? Water. How come they didn't use those? I mean, they got them. That's part of the supply pack. Why didn't God say, somebody be in charge of filling up the pitchers, somebody get the cups, make sure everybody gets 3 Dixie cups. They had access to the pitchers. This is not a picnic, though. That's what you do on a picnic. They're not being refreshed for enjoyment. They're being refreshed for endurance. This is a small step, and then we're going to march again. The battle's up ahead of us. This isn't fill up your tummy and go to the house and take a nap. The test was to prove who was the best, not because they earned a rest. In Judges 7, look at verse 2. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into thy hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand hath saved me. He said, if these people don't go in weak so I can prove it was me that did the fighting, they'll think they're so powerful they can come against me. They'll vaunt themselves against God. Kind of like the Midianites were doing themselves. The crowd is made up mostly of fearful cowards or arrogant imbeciles full of pride. That's the crowd. Find a crowd, there's the majority mix right there. You remember Saul, when he was anointed king, Samuel brought him in. He has this to say about Samuel. Samuel says this about Saul later on in his life when he's critiquing him. And Samuel said, when thou wast little in thine own sight, Wast thou not made head of the tribes of Israel? This is the tallest man in Israel, head and shoulders taller than anybody else. Samuel said, there was a day and a time when you thought you were small in your own sight. You didn't look in the mirror and say, what a big man I am. No conceited people in this army. We can't be. Humility is a must in Christianity. Okay, no cowards, no one that's conceited, and no cynic. In chapter 7, verse 9. Chapter 7, verse 9. He says, and it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, arise, get thee down unto the host, for I have delivered it into thine hand. But if thou fear to go down, go thou with Pua, thy servant, down to the host. Now what's going on here is he's finally whittled this army down to 300. And I'm sure that Gideon is sighing a sigh of relief, mopping the sweat off his brow. He's done cutting my people down. Good. Let's get this show on the road. But then he looks around. He can probably hear the crowd of the enemy in the valley. Your voice carries. And it's probably, quite a noise he's hearing. And it probably makes him scared. Now, remember the first way we had to cut out the army? Fear. Now, don't you believe Gideon's feeling a little bit of that fear? Now, he's probably afraid to admit that he's afraid. But he's afraid. Guess what? There's always a little mixture of fear in your faith. What'd the man that came up to Jesus say? Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. Keep working on it. Which way are you heading? Are you heading toward faith or are you heading toward fear? The presence of faith does not mean there's an absence of fear. It means the one you're trying to build is faith. These people that were not heading toward faith but were heading toward fear, God said, y'all go to the house. I might be able to use you after you see the army is getting whooped. Then I'll call you out of the barracks because then you'll be headed toward faith. And that's what he does. A cynic. I'm going to use that word in its original meaning. The cynic was a member of the ancient school of the Greek philosophers. They were marked by an ostentatious contempt for ease or pleasure. They loved being hard on themselves, as though that earned them something. They could use an AC unit, but they wouldn't do it. Now that's just stupid. If you live in Florida and it's 150 degrees outside and you can turn on the AC, turn that thing on. Not a cynic. A cynic would say, no, let's keep the AC out. That's not natural. Now Christians get that way too, because much of the Christian life is negative. We have to say no to the flesh. We have to say no this. No, you can't have that. Yes, you're going to obey God. Those all feel negative, negative, negative. And if you're not careful, you'll become negative. That's a cynic. Don't let negativity overpower you either. You should remember you're not in the battle to prove everything is bad and negative. You're in the battle to prove God is good and He knows what He's doing. Keep the focus on Him. We talked about that in Sunday school a little bit. Let's see, God's going to give Gideon assurance here. Gideon's probably been doing all these things the way he's supposed to, and now Gideon's probably got a little question mark in his mind. And we'll have that too. As God begins to reveal to you what you're supposed to do in your life, what you cut out, what you add. He'll do that individually. I'm not going to do that. God does that. He'll tell you, don't do this. Add you a little bit of this over here. And you'll start doing that thinking, that don't make any sense. Nobody else is doing it this way. Why'd you tell me to do that? That's what Gideon's got here. He's got an army of 300 going up against two massive armies. And he's got pitchers and lamps. Ooh.
And God.
And God. That's it. That one makes the difference. Look at it in our passage. Chapter 7, verse 14. And his fellow answered and said, This is nothing save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. For into his hands God hath delivered Midian and all the host. This is an interpretation of a dream a man had in the camp of the Midianites. Verse 15. And it was so. And when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped, and returned unto the host of Israel, and said, Arise, for the Lord hath delivered into your hand the host of the Midian. Okay, so there he's finally been given a little pat on the back, a little encouragement by God. Hey, this is going to be fine. Watch. I'll prove it to you. And he does that with us. If you'll step out and do the hard things, like Gideon did, chopping his army down to nothing, if you'll do that, he'll give you a little encouragement along the way. And he'll say, yeah, you're heading the right way. You're doing exactly what I wanted you to do. Now, it's not always, or we would just depend on those things. But all along the way, God will give you, hey, do this, and a little instruction and a little pat on the back. That keeps us moving. God doesn't want man to become all negative. Even after he's taken negative actions to obey the Lord, God gives Gideon here a preview of the victory to come. Now, we got to keep our eyes on the victory to come. Okay, we've seen in our passage, no coward, no one that's conceited, and no cynic. Next thing and last thing we'll see is in chapter 8. Chapter 8. Judges 8, verse 4. The next rule is no capitulation. No giving up. Chapter 8, verse 4. And Gideon came to Jordan and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint, yet pursuing them. Okay, they're wore out, but they're still running. That didn't stop them. They're going to keep on running. If fear can't keep you out of the fight, if pride doesn't distract you, if negativity can't turn you against God, fatigue will assault you. Count on it. This body will fight you itself. Fatigue. It'll just be wore out. Spiritually, your body can really affect, this physical body can affect your spiritual life. There's times your mind is clearer, and there's times your mind hardly works. When you're starving, it's probably not a good time to try to get you some Bible reading in. Your mind just doesn't seem to work that well. When you're overtired, those times you're not at your best. Why not give God your best? I mean, it's fine to do that too. And there's times you got to tell your body, I'm the one in control, not you. That's fine. But also remember, it's God. Would you give a king the worst you had? Or your leftovers? No, sir, give him your best. There's times you'll have to figure it out for yourself. I'm not a morning person. No, that's not me. Now, I am, after about the 12th coffee cup, I'm pretty well okay. No, I'm not a morning person. Toby can do mornings a lot better than I can do mornings. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's not me. That's not me. Yeah. My Bible study is best in the evening. I've been up and my mind works after a while. Now, there's a point that's not a good thing for me to do. There's some days where I've just given it my all, and when I get home, there's nothing left. The mind doesn't work. Well, you do all you can do. Faint yet pursuing. Keep on anyway. You've done all you can do. That's usually when you're good, but just happens to be today you're no good. So what? Keep pursuing. That's what the 300 are doing right here. All right, where are we? I lost my place. Okay. Proverbs. Look at Proverbs chapter 24. Proverbs 24, verse 10. Yeah. Proverbs 24:10. The Bible says, "If thou faint in the day of adversity, thy strength is small." Ouch. Don't give up when the fight gets hard. That's the reason you prepare for the fight. You know, there's a big difference in fighting in a movie and sparring in the dojo versus a street fight. There's a world of difference. That's what we do. We come to church, we get in groups, we do little Bibles. That's great. That's preparation. But there's a world of difference between that and the street fight. The devil's going to come at you when you least suspect it. Your training had better kick in. And don't expect it to be textbook like it was in your little study group, because neither is it on the street when you're surprised. In Jeremiah 12 verse 5. Jeremiah 12:5. He says, if thou hast run with the footman. Who wants to do running? We saw my cousin who came down from Tennessee, and their son wants to get into track. That didn't make any sense to me at all. Why would you go running just for the fun of running without somebody chasing you? Some people do. Some people like that. He says right here, if you've been running with the footman, you're the foot soldier, and you get wore out doing that. I would be wore out, the first lap. And they were, how canst thou contend with horses? You see God's soldier? He intends them to be equal to a horse. Wow. You better be able to run as hard as a horse. That's setting the bar way high. And if in the land of peace, in the study group, in the church, in the, fun times, if in the land of peace, wherein thou trustest, they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of Jordan? When things really get tough, how are you going to make it if you can't handle it in peace? Now that's the American church. We don't often think about it, but if we were to compare our Christianity to the ones in China, we come up way short. Yes. Way short. We're living in the lap of luxury. We've got peace. We can choose what we do, when we do it, and to what extent. They can't. But yet, they make the main thing the main thing. They keep the eye on the goal. We should too. Now in conclusion, Psalms chapter 33. He'll give us a conclusion for this. Psalms 33 verse 16. Psalms 33:16. This is how God's army is to fight, and it doesn't make any sense to man because it's God's fight. We're just foot soldiers. We're just helpers. Psalms 33 verse 16. There is no king saved by the multitude of an host. Doesn't matter how big that army is, God decides the outcome. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength, and horse is a vain thing for safety. Neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him. Now there's a good fear. That one won't send you to the house, but that fear right there will qualify you to get in the battle. Upon them that hope in his mercy. Now that's a great phrase. We had better all focus on that right there. Hope in his mercy. The stuff you don't deserve? Okay, because the more fear of God you have, the more you see you're undeserving. And you suddenly find mercy very appealing. And we should all hope in his mercy. But that's a hope that a Christian gets. The more you know about God, the more you find his mercy. Verse 19, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our help, our shield. For our heart shall rejoice. That's future. Battle hadn't started yet. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us. Ouch. I don't know about this phrase right here. According, that is to the same degree. as we hope in thee. I hope most Christians don't quote that part, because most of them haven't put a whole lot of hope in him. They put a whole lot of hope in the bank. They put a whole lot of hope in their effort. They put a whole lot of hope in their parents and, their circle of influence. That's not how we get mercy from God. He said, here, I'm doling out mercy based on how you've put your hope in me to the same degree. Well, okay, there it is. We can get it. In Hebrews 11, we find Gideon one last time. Here he's getting an honorable mention in the Hall of Fame. Hebrews 11:32. He says, and what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon. That's the man we just studied. Verse 33. Who through faith subdued kingdoms. That's our mission we're on. Wrought righteousness. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Obtained promises. Stopped the mouth of lions. The devil walks about as a roaring lion. He says right here, we can do that too, if you're in the army. Now, to be in the army, to be a good soldier of Christ, there's qualifications to it. There's some restrictions. No coward, no one that's conceited, no cynic, and no capitulation. Paul gave this charge to Timothy, and you can put your name in here. This charge I commit unto thee, fill in your name, that thou by them mayest war a good warfare. Not all good Christians are good Christian soldiers. They may appear good on the outside, but God's put some requirements. He put some restrictions down. We need to make sure we qualify.